think, so tell John, we had actually introduced everyone earlier. Actually, I don't know if we ever did introduce. This is the most handsome man in the room.
According to one. It's all again.
Well, I have a question for Micah. Were you just taking questions from me?
Yes.
I really like your stick figure diagram with the equal,
Oh,
figure
mutual
equal
respect,
in,
yeah.
the three areas. And it was great that you jumped right into the maturity picture, because the first thing lights are going off in my head saying, what teenager has the maturity to be able to put their own opinions and desires below the values, boundaries, and what was the other one, beliefs
Yeah.
of another person, and not in a negative, like looking down on them kind of way, but they're as a parent, I think I see them being pretty selfish, self-centered,
Oh, yeah.
and really not ready for relationships when they're 15 and 16. So when you give that talk, and you talk about the maturity piece, I'm just wondering, does light bulb go off in their head? Do they agree with you? Do they disagree with you? How do they back?
Yeah, I usually receive it fine. I mean, when I ask the question about, the pot, the plant burner, the pot, I ask them the question. I say, what are some examples of things about being in high school that could limit how big of a commitment you could make to this person? And they usually come up with those themselves. So they get it, they know, but they don't have any concept of understanding that if I'm trying to fit this big mature relationship right now in this context, that's why it's not going to go over super well, because high school wasn't meant to. And one thing I didn't do in this talk that I do at a school is I make it very clear that soon as a teenager hears the word maturity, usually they're thinking, great, you're going to tell me I'm immature because I'm a teenager. And I address that actually, and I tell them I'm not going to tell you that because I don't believe that, so why would I even say that? The reality is you are mature. In fact, why would someone call you immature when at your age you're exactly where you're supposed to be? So I'm trying to lay a groundwork first to help them recognize that actually they are mature, they are smart, they are capable, on and on and on. And then we talk about that. So they're obviously going to be way more receptive to the reality of yeah, I can date in high school, but maybe take some pressure off of it. And I ask them, for instance, in trying to make it this big mature thing now, right? And that includes being sexually active, because you're introducing something that a mature relationship would have. So just getting them to really question what that should look like, I think is important. I don't know if that's answering your question exactly, but they are capable of having having healthy dating relationships in high school. They just the way they go about it's really unhealthy. As any parent, one of the primary things you're trying to teach our young people, the ones that you're mentoring, is trying to help them understand in terms of the greatest transition into adulthood is learning to live a life that isn't completely about you. That's a really important thing one of the most important things to know in your transition to an adult is living a life that's not completely about you. And that's what we're trying to teach the kids in a sense, without maybe using that particular phrase, although I have said that before. You got to learn at some point, especially in any relationship, that sometimes there's compromise. Not disrespect, I'm talking about compromise, where I use the example of even, go to a movie they want to see for once. I mean, to some kids, that's a no-brainer, and they're already doing that. But there's other kids who are going, this is not even a concept. They're like, oh, I'm being selfish because I'm doing what I want to do all the time. And that just feeds into the culture we live in terms of what it means to be a man. Men, the status thing. You get girls. And that gets man points from your guy friends. That's a big deal. And you talk about all the girls and how you're able to score with them and use sporting terms to talk about a girl, which is so messed up, And then women feel like their value's placed in how many guys find their Instagram photos sexy. And we talk about that and how that is, what's wrong with that. But then again, if you don't talk about these things with the kids, they'll never really be able to think about it for themselves and recognize that there's something off, and that, oh, my value's deeper. Now I'm just blabbing, but I hope that makes sense.
Can I add one thing to
Yeah,
that?
please.
Because the Reality Project comes to my class and speaks, and then I kind of follow up with everything after for like a month longer. We talk more about it.
That's just so good, because
no.
otherwise it'd just be like,
Yeah. They get the whole flower in the pot and the response. They like, once they see a visual of it, they get it and they bring it up. Like literally the rest of the school year, they'll bring that one visual up. So they get that they're not mature enough for these adult level relationships, but they need to come to that conclusion,
Yes.
not us.
yes.
And just talk, you can guide the discussion that way 100%, but those words cannot come out of your mouth. Another thing that I think is huge is avoid telling kids that they are not in love, because they are. They're in love for that stage of their life. It looks very different than my love, and my love right now is going to look very different when I'm 60, 70, 80 years old for him. It's going to look different, and that's normal. So being like, oh, you're not in love, it's okay, you'll get over it. That's like one of the worst things that you can say to a kid, because they very much are in love and they very much want to be in that relationship. They just don't really know how to make it work. But that's why the plant analogy works so well, because a lot of our kids are acting like they're married when they're 15. Their parents let them sleep together, like stay the night. They get up in the morning and go to school together. Like they're acting like little mini married couples when it's not healthy at all. And that's we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place of figuring out how to say that that's not a healthy relationship without condemning what they're currently doing and what their parents currently allow. That's kind of where it's awkward. But yeah, don't ever say you're not in love. They'll be like,
Some of them
I don't know.
genuinely believe they're in love with Taco Bell.
yeah, they
Yeah.
do. Yep.
And they
No,
probably
for
are.
real,
They
for real.
really are. It's-
Yeah.
yeah, I'm in love with food. I'll admit it,
Yeah.
you know? So.
For Carol, okay, so this kind of goes back to what you were saying about the fat kid, the kids that are ready for kind of a deeper relationship. And I know I've talked to the other Carol about, how she's taken out kids, and I know you have too, and had one-on-one times with them. Like, how do you do that so you're not offending the other kids, and how do you pick the ones? I mean, yes, I understand what you're saying, that sometimes kids show that they're ready, but I don't know, how do you make it seem fair?
I think we do it with all of them. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm just gonna do one-on-one time with just you. We share our one-on-one times with all of them. It's kind of like how you would be with your kids, right? Like, I don't know if that's a fair example, but I don't love my one kid more than I love my other kid. I love them differently, and so like, what are some of the different expressions of love I can bestow upon this person? And I think that's sort of like going to a game might be more meaningful than me sitting down and having coffee with you, or like, I think it's knowing the personality of that person and what's going to be meaningful to them.
Has there been jealousy? Do they compare?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's also like, going back to, teenagers, like, their brains aren't fully developed, Like, and I'm not even saying that to be insulting, like, they're just not.
They don't
Literally.
get
Yeah, it's true. And so, I think you're gonna have to deal with jealousy and issues like that, because there is an egocentrism that naturally exists within the teenage mind, but that's also an excellent, teaching, learning opportunity too.
We bring that up with unhealthy relationships. I'll ask, is it healthy? Is jealousy, can jealousy be or an example of an unhealthy relationship, or something that could poison a relationship? And it's kind of a trick question, because it's kind of, both and. I say, can jealousy go too far? And they all go, yeah, it can definitely go too far. And what does it lead to? Well, it can lead to, control or manipulation. And where does it come from? Well, insecurity or paranoia and emotionally unstable. But at the same time, there's a certain amount of jealousy that's healthy.
Yeah.
I'm jealous for my wife and all those things. But can that go too far? I ask them. They go, yeah, that can go too far. You know what I mean? Like, you know, so, yeah.
I have a logistic question for you, for Gary. It sounds like you allow the mentor to actually put a student in their car and take them somewhere?
So Linda can answer that. I'm a delegator.
Yes, we do.
Do you have a liability?
We do have training for all the mentors. It's a safety training and certification that they earn. And we talk a lot about, the boundaries and we know our
Permission
mentors
slips
too,
follow.
and permission slips from guardians, and all of that. But yeah, it is a risk, and this is part of, when you do consent to being a mentor, there are risks. It is not an easy, I'll always be safe in this. There are very real risks, and these kids are, really worth it, but then you have to kind of weigh, what is it that I can, in good conscience, do? And we have that, a number of our mentors have had our girls come and live with them. We had a gal that had to escape out a window because her mom's pimp threatened her life. And she had a mentor that she could safely go to. And a lot of our mentors have, and for different periods of time, some can do it longer than others. Some can just do it a really brief because of life circumstances. And some can't do it at all, and we understand that. In fact, probably the majority can't do it at all. But all of them are just so wonderful to just step in and do what they can do and fill in the gaps. But yeah, there's risk.
I'll tack on to that. So I've definitely driven girls around, sometimes like multiple times during the same session. But those are some of the best times. Like having like one-on-one time, or like even just like we're all stuck in the car together, think road trips. It's sometimes when they get the most serious and like talk to you about life and or have real questions so I wouldn't trade driving them around.
And I would add to that it's a chance to get to see where they live.
Yeah.
And sometimes meet their parents or guardians.
Yeah, and their parents more often than not are like, thank you for dropping my kid off because I didn't want to come get them.
And sometimes I let them drive.
That is true.
Thanks.
Several of the girls to drive.
That's awesome.
Been there, done that. Yeah, you taught them.
You have to teach them to drive.
Well, I have another concern to ask the panel. With me being an older person, how do I establish them to relate to me? Because, I don't watch their movies, I don't listen
Thank
to their
goodness.
music. I don't know their lingo, because I know they try to stay a step ahead of the adults with their slang and everything. So how, do you have any pointers on that?
Can I address that?
Yeah.
Oh, no, there.
I kind of wondered that too, because I'm the age of, most of the girls' parents or whatever. And, I think sometimes you just gravitate to, and sometimes they don't care who you are or how old you are, but if you love them and you care for them and you listen to them, they don't care about those things, And sometimes they learn things from you or quote you or some, things, but, I always thought, where would I fit in?
And I'll add to that, I'm a middle school teacher, and I cannot tell you how many times my kids will say, like, when we're doing like something, we have an older people come in, or we watch a video with a grandma on there, and they'll always, 100% say, I love grandmas. I love old people. Sometimes old is like 30. But, gray hair legitimately old, they'll, grandma, grandpa age, and I'll say, what do you love about them? And they're like, they know stuff. Right? And they're always nice. And they make cookies. And it's like those three things. there. You're listening to them, and I think people underestimate that they don't have somebody that picks them up and takes them someplace and says their name and recognizes they're there. I mean, we have this big movement in our school to make it a goal that every single kid, we say their name when they walk through the door, because that might be the only time they actually hear their name in a positive way. So it's like, yeah, I mean, you're there, you're showing up, that's a big deal.
I'd add to that, because they think that you're a knowledge bank of like, you know, all these things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's almost fun for them to teach you things
Yes.
about what they know that you don't. So you can almost play into that. It's like, oh, I don't know that. You got to teach me. And they're more than eager to tell you what that looks like in their world. So.
And get out of your comfort zone a little bit, because I remember like there was one time that me and my brother, when we were little, we were playing Dance Dance Revolution with like the dance pad, you know? We're like dancing, and then my dad, sometimes we're like, Dad, come over here and do this. And he was like, no. And then he did, and we thought it was the coolest thing ever. So it just like,
I don't have to
stuff
dance.
like that. It's not required. It might give you the
The one thing just to remember too is like the number one thing that's gonna be the most impact on them is you being yourself, not trying to be cool, to, you know, because especially as you get to know them, if you're in a mentoring relationship, they're gonna find out very quickly if you've been just being cool, or how uncool you actually are. In a lot of ways, I think the funniest things about you are the uncool things about you. But there was an example I at the end of my class last Thursday. I said thank you, and there was, I don't know, it was a Q&A. I can't remember how this got brought up, but they asked me what music I listened to, and you know, I listen to music that most kids don't listen to. I listen to really heavy music, and so some of the kids can relate to that. And so I had this girl come up to me after class. She was a freshman. She's like, "Oh, so you listen to like," and she lists off these bands that are the type of music I listen to. But when she said, "Do you listen to them? Do you listen to them?" I said, "No." And she's like, "Why?" I'm like, "Because their lyrics, that those guys literally," because I know these bands, right? And I'm like, they're womanizers, they party, and I just listed off all the things that we just talked about all week and why I don't listen to them. And she was like, "Oh," but I'm not going to sit there and be like, "Oh yeah, they're a cool band." I'm going to be like, "No, I don't listen to them because they're not cool." You know, like I'm going to be real with them that I can connect with you because I listen to the same kind of music, but I'm not going to just like be a fake about that to find any kind of possible way to like relate to you. You know what I mean? Like there was more value in her hearing that like, no, I don't listen to those. I listen to that type of music, but I don't listen to that particular band because I don't want to put those things in my head. And I was just very real with her. So, and I think she, you know, genuinely that for her was me being very real. So she could trust me to know I was going to tell her the truth. Not in a disrespectful or belligerent way. I was respectful, but I was honest with her when she asked why I don't. I said, well, kind of the same reason of all the stuff we talked about. That's why I don't listen to them. So anyways, yeah.
I have a question about the poverty culture. Sorry, so when you have kids that have been growing up in that environment, and especially with that entitlement attitude, and they expect things right away, they get the money, it's feast or famine, what kind of things do you say, what kind of incentives are there for them to work hard to get out of it? You know, what's the incentive to work hard and go to college to get off of food stamps, when right now people are just giving you money?
I think sometimes it's showing them in tangible ways like where that gets them. So, you know, if it's a kid that doesn't plan, you know, if I have a relationship with that kid and they call me 10 minutes after something started, I'm like, "Sorry, dude, I'm already here. You knew about this days ago. You could have texted me. You have my number. You know I'm always available, and I've picked you up in the past." So I've showed that I'm available and I'm faithful to getting you there if you need me, but like you also have to learn how to plan. So little things like that I think go a long way, because the next time they're going to be like, "Oh, well, next time I see you, we're talking about it, and then we're going to plan that I'm going to pick you up, you know, days before or even the day of instead of 10 minutes after." We have kids come to our house and they see our house and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like, how'd you guys get here? Like, how did you guys went to David Douglas, and you're only how old? And you have a house, and you're just like, well, you know, these are the things,
This
these
is
are the
how.
steps
Mhm.
that you take to get there. And, you know, you can do this. We went to the same high school. Like, you know, I grew up with one mom, just like you have in your house. Like, you can do this. But it's inviting them into our world, you know, the little things, going to the grocery store and doing the little things that they just don't ever see, you know, like not using EBT cards to buy, you know, actual like produce, and how do you cook that into a meal? Okay, you're gonna come over, you're gonna make spaghetti, like.
We're gonna teach you how to do, just like inviting them into your life, because most of the time they don't want those things, either because they don't even know it exists or they don't know enough about it. So if you just expose them to it and talk about the process to get there, goals that you had set, how it worked or didn't work or whatever, like they'll naturally come to that conclusion on their own without you saying like you need to go to college or you need to graduate high school or you need to do this. They'll want it. Every kid wants to be successful. It looks differently for every kid. But just exposing them to what it looks like, they'll come to that conclusion on their own.
They start asking questions. You know,
Lots.
and you know, like they'll say, well, so to be a teacher, like you had to go to college?
Like, you have a degree?
Yeah, like they don't
Like,
know that.
yeah.
And you're like, yeah, actually, and I actually have a master's.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like, and they're like, so, and you can see the little wheels turning. You know, so where did you go? You know, and then you tell them where you went. You know, and it's like. And I remember that's what changed for me was I went to a teacher's house. And it was elementary, and she had a pool party, and she had a yellow house and a white picket fence and a pool. And I can't even imagine this, like you know, having a bunch of kids over, right? You know, and in her pool, I can't even imagine. But she did, and I remember thinking, what did she do to get this? Because that's so not my life. Like and from then on, and you make that, and you're like, oh, then you have like this dream. Like I always wanted a house, and I always wanted a house with a yellow house with a white picket fence and roses and a pool, you know. But you don't even know that exists until you see that world, you know. And I even see that now. Like you have to see the world, and then you'll start asking questions when you see the value in it.
Yes. Yep.
You know, but
There
you
has
have
to be some value.
and that value has to be better than what you have. It has to be worth giving up your family, because no matter how bad your family is, it's all you know, and you'll take the bad because you know it. You know, and the unknown is so scary, even if it's something you want.
Yep.
And then if you don't add to that, you don't know how to get there, and add to that, your family's against you. You're asking a kid to do something so hard.
It's everything they've ever known.
Everything. Yeah. They have to die to that life.
Yep.
This sounds an awful lot like Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does service ever come into this? Do they ever get the opportunity to serve those who are less fortunate
Yes.
than themselves?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think so. Like I've had them help me with bake sales. I have. They've sat through presentations where we talk about human trafficking in other parts of the world. They did. They've made scarves and like done stuff for like homeless people, and so like I think.
We did lap pads for the survivors.
Yeah, so I think that does become an element of it, and I know at least like one kid who is pretty vocal about how much she loves doing that, because I think they're all mindful of there are people less fortunate than me, so yeah, I think they enjoy it thoroughly.
For us, we have done like going out in the community, serving the homeless food, stuff like that. But our main focus is how do you serve the people in your own community, like at David Douglas High School? What can we do to transform the culture there on a more like practical, like everyday level? How can you serve the person sitting next to you in your math class? How for our upperclassmen, how can you serve the freshmen? And we talk about that. That's more of what we do. I like the Bible study at our house. Like, okay, here's what Jesus did. Here's the story. What does that look like at David Douglas? What does that look like for you with the freshmen?
teaching stuff. How did you learn all this relationship stuff? Because I feel like, okay, I revealed this over here to Gary, but like, I'm an older woman and I'm taking notes, like I'm, you know, taking them from my kids. but like, I mean, you seem really young and you know all this stuff. Like, how did you learn this?
'Cause I'm an expert.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, so it's, so people, sometimes in the Q&A, kids will ask, kids are really interested in what I do, and I'm like, I want to be, you know, like, did you go to school to be the sex man? They asked me, did you go to school? And I actually didn't. I mean, you can to be a health teacher, that kind of stuff. No, so I was a volunteer with Reality before, so they have this material, and I spent from first hearing about it and meeting with the previous director, I spent a year just working on it and going through this process. There's quite a process. Anybody can be a volunteer, and then you can learn this stuff and go into schools. You're going to alter it to fitting your own stories, because you share a lot of personal stuff, stories, examples, and the curriculum is always developing and changing over the years. Especially, for example, we talk about pornography a lot more in the last couple of years than we did 5-10 years ago. Reality did, because that's what we need to talk about right now. It's such a different thing in our culture, so much more prevalent. So that stuff's just, now that I'm director, I'm working on that curriculum. But yeah, no, I just spent a good year just learning it, learning the material that I was given, and then altering it, and then eventually, I was a volunteer for about a little over a year before I started as director. So I only had gone to 2 schools ever before to present, and now I do it full time. I do it almost every week. But that's how. But at the same time, there's things like reality plug. Here we go. We're going to be working on curriculum for middle schools. Get back into middle schools, but that's something I'm just going to be working on, and any resource I can use. You know, meeting with people and resource from teachers. What do you want? And then the other thing that schools have been asking for a lot is a part 2, a sequel, so a follow-up. I think even David Douglas and lots of schools have been like, we want you back. We want more of this, especially to continue the conversation, because there's so much we try to cram into 1 week that we don't even get to a lot of different things. So as of right now, I've been working on material for a part 2 that we're hoping to, by next spring, be offering to schools to not only sign us up for this presentation, but a part 2, a follow-up, that they would sign us up for another week. So it's really, I don't know, like, how I know the stuff I know now is mostly just because, it's just stuff I learned by being a volunteer, if that makes any sense.
Micah, if you came to, like, my kids are in a private Christian school.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure that how the school, the principal and all that would feel about this topic being addressed. But are there women that come in and do the presentation? Because I know for sure they wouldn't do it boys and girls together.
In the past, there have been women, and there haven't been, but we actually just got a new volunteer, and it's a woman, and she's, I mean, you have to be a certain type for it, and she's just great. She hasn't presented yet. She did a kind of walkthrough presentation with me at my office, which we have any volunteer do, and then she's gonna be coming with me to David Douglas, actually, kind of tag teaming. We always have each volunteer, before we release them to go off by themselves, to come to a school with us. So we do now, and she's awesome. And she's just a young stay-at-home mom with 2 young boys. And she just really is passionate about this and wants to be a part of it. So she can give a week or 2 a year to go to a school and do this herself. So I see a lot of value in that as well, especially with schools. We're in like over 20 schools. Only 2 of those are Christian schools. And we had a school, I won't tell you which one, but they contacted us but they asked us, they said, and this was just when I started as director, so I didn't even respond, my assistant did, but they were like, can you come to our school and talk to our kids about waiting till marriage to have sex? And we were like, we get that, but at the same time, we're not going to go to a Christian school and alter everything. We want to give them the same information we would anybody else and let them think for themselves with that stuff. Now, when I go to a Christian school, obviously I can integrate other biblical things to it, and I have more freedom, but I'm not going to go and change everything for these youth. We don't feel like that's fair, and ultimately, we want to be in Christian schools, but without sounding bad, we want to be in public schools more. You know, that's really important. And we do go to youth groups, and we do, you know, do that kind of stuff too. But anyways, I'm really long-winded, sorry.
No, I thought you made a really good point that it's in our culture, it's everywhere in the culture.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about it in the home. And
Yeah.
I really don't think the church, I mean, you know, maybe the church in a sermon is addressing it lightly, but not really in a Christian school,
Yeah.
in a youth group.
Yeah.
Then it's taboo. You don't talk about
Yeah,
it.
and that's where the parent forum comes in, where we go and just meet with parents and have this half-day workshop where we can just really encourage parents to wrestle through these things and to be okay with reality that it's terrifying. And but I don't go with the answers. It's a workshop. A lot of it's discussion based, where we wrestle through these things, just even see what the Bible says about these things.
Yeah.
I'm not a parent, like I don't know, but if anything, to encourage a parent to be like, it's still super important to have those conversations, because believe it or not, your kids want you to talk to them about
And I
this.
just-
They
I just
really do.
think the church is in denial. Well, our kids aren't doing that because
Yeah.
they're in Christian schools.
Some churches, yeah, for sure.
In general.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
I have a question. How do you deal with kids that have questions about like being curious with being gay or bi-curious? Do they ask you questions?
So depending on the school, again, we sometimes have an opportunity for anonymous Q&A where they write down questions and pass them up. Somebody else was just asking me about this too. Obviously, we're not going in and we can't go in and just give them moral imperatives. You know, like I might give the example, I give them an example of me and my wife decided to wait to have marriage to have sex. But the thing is, instead of just going and telling kids what to do and what not to do, we give them the why is really the important thing. That's what kids are asking, is the why. And so I would tell them like why we did this. Not that you have to, but this is just what we did and why we did it. But anyways, when it comes to questions like that, we can't give it a moral imperative in terms of saying like this is wrong or whatever. Those questions have come up in a Q&A, anonymous on a piece of paper, and that's what I'd have to say is I'm not here to give you a moral imperative on whether that's right or wrong. We show a BuzzFeed video at the beginning of the presentation that talks about it's parents talking to their kids for the very first time about sex. And these kids are between ages like 5 and 10, so it's really hilarious, awkward, gets the kids kind of loosened up and laughing. It's not a Christian video, and there's a lesbian couple. Of course, you have to have your, you know. So we have to be very careful and very inclusive of those things. When we talk about the different forms of sex, we talk about all the different forms of sex. Because granted, any form of sex is still going to have the same impact on you, right? So we include those things without, I mean, I'm not going in glorifying them or promoting them, but we're just being real about what they are. And when it comes to like talking about a romantic relationship, I have to say, in a sense, any romantic relationship between any two people of any gender or orientation. That's just the world we live in. And there are some schools I'll go into, and there are clearly kids that are cross-dressing, transgender, so on and so forth. But that's just who we're working with. So we're just being real about that stuff. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's like I can't really, like I can, but I can't address that stuff. At least from a moral perspective, I can't be telling them that what I think is right or wrong about that stuff. I'm more just trying to get them to really think about these things. There was an example, the previous director, Lane, said that this girl who was transgender came up to him after class when he had gone through the presentation, and especially talking about exploitation and abuse and trafficking and things like that. She came up to him after class, after everyone left, and she was sharing her story, a story that the counselors already knew. But she said, you know, she had been raped multiple times by her dad, just the horrific stories, right? And she sat there just sharing with Lane about her story. It might have even been at David Douglas, I'm not positive.
Probably.
But sharing just horrific stuff. But her going, just thank you so much for everything that you shared. Because I knew that there was a reason why I'm struggling with this kinds of stuff, this identity stuff, you know? And anyways, with that being said, he said he just got to his car, got in the car and just bawled like a baby, you know, because realizing this is why we do what we do, right? But really what we're trying to do is ultimately for that girl is getting them to open up and realize the why.